8,
You're watching The
7,
Experience, Comic Culture and Sales.
5,
Streaming live daily to
4,
Facebook, YouTube,
3,
Twitch, and Twitter.
2, 1.
So I was scrolling through TikTok yesterday, as I do when the ADHD demons are very strong in my brain and the energy to do anything other than go like this for hours doesn't exist. And I came across a video of Weird Al, who ironically put out his first new single in a number of years following last week's debate. But the video was actually a parody song of him parodying a song of him parodying one of his own songs, where he was making fun of AI for stealing the jobs of guys whose job it is to steal ideas from other songs and make parodies of them. At that point, it all got a little bit meta for me, and I had to go lie down in a dark room for a few minutes while I wrapped my brain around how many negatives Weird Al could put into a sentence before it became a positive. And as it turns out, the answer is 3 lefts make a right, apparently. I didn't know. But it kind of meshes with our topic today. As you see from the thumbnail and as you read from the title, is last week's controversy and this week's controversy regarding a certain artist the tip of the iceberg, or are we already sunk? Is there room in the world for Weird Al Yankovic, or is it all just the TikTok songs written by AI from here on out? It's an interesting problem, especially because I like parody songs, and it's getting really hard to tell what is and isn't a parody. This is Devil's Advocates. What's up, the internet? I'm producer Kyle, and that is Bronze Age Nerd. And I want to give a shout out to the person who just popped into our Instagram feed, who has one of the greatest names, Wobbly's Comic Stash, which is just, in my vision, in my brain, a mustache on a comic book character that's slightly crooked.
Oh, I thought stash like stash of comics. Okay, nice.
I'm sure that's what he meant, but in my brain, because I'm very tired, it became mustache, and it was crooked.
I just pictured like a wobbly spinner rack, and that was like the way. I don't know. Either one's good, especially with a little mustache on the top of it.
Shout out to Wobbly. Shout out to Skunk Snot. Say hi when you're here, everybody. We know this is maybe a weird topic for some folks, so we want to make sure to, thank everybody for being here. Bronze, do you want to? I made my little Weird Al comment, and I did have to go lay in a dark room after watching that video for a while. Do you want to kind of explain to the people what it is we're here to discuss today?
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to build off what Kyle said for a second. This is a bit of a weird topic for people. There's been a lot of backlash and I think kind of cynicism about the topic of AI, which is going to come up in this episode. So just to clarify, this isn't about AI art per se. This kind of starts the story of where we're going to talk about it. So if you're thinking, oh, this is just going to be about AI, oh, this is just going to be about artist witch hunts, actually, no. Although those topics will be addressed here, it's really just kind of one segment. It's the tip of the iceberg for what we're talking about in a way. So what happened is there's a very prominent, popular cover artist out there, Francesco Mattina, who honestly, for years, I was a fan of Mattina's artwork. There's a lot of gorgeous covers that came out if you like that kind of digital style. I remember there was a Swamp Thing book that came out that really caught my eye about 4 years ago. I can't remember which issue, but a lot of great covers that really caught my eye over the years came out from Mattina. But one thing I did notice is that I started seeing a lot of allegations of Mattina stealing work, swiping covers, tracing, those sorts of things. And there's actually been about 3 times that I can think of where I've heard those allegations levied at Mattina before. Time goes on, Mattina still continues to do a lot of work. I think he probably puts out covers pretty quickly. He's an in-demand cover artist, maybe bounced around from publisher to publisher a little bit, stayed with DC for the most part, though. Then a couple weeks ago, you have Adi Granov, who is another fantastic artist out there, does a lot of great work. Love Granov's work. Comes out and basically calls out Mattina. And this is kind of where I know a lot of people are going to be like, this sounds very familiar because you have an artist calling out another artist for the use of AI in their artwork. And it's something I know it's a hot button topic for others, but let's actually dissect a little bit about what came out. If you look at you can easily Google this if you want to see a picture of this. It's in our thumbnail. If you want to see a closer look at it, though, of the Superman symbol, you can just Google Mattina Superman logo, and I'm sure it'll pop right up for you in the images. Basically, the emblem, the L emblem on the House of L emblem on Superman's chest, there's that bottom part of the S. Well, that repeats on the bottom of this cover that was going to come out for an Action Comics comic from Mattina for DC. And it repeats in a way that is, I would say, being completely reasonable. It is like 99% impossible that a human artist would do that. I mean, I understand, there's a lot of debate about, I've seen 6 fingers on a character on a cover. That means it's AI. Well, no, there's been 6 finger, 4 finger hands drawn in comic books for decades. That doesn't mean it's AI.
Are you the 6-fingered man? You killed my father.
Yeah, Mattina is and Montoya. There's a lot of M names going on here, but yeah, it's one of those things where I think that's a hot button topic for the community right now because there is a lot of that going on. There's a lot of knee-jerk reactions to digital art in some cases, bad art in some cases, but this was pretty clear cut, right? Like I think most people see this image and they see that zoomed. I actually had a couple people approach me and say, "What's this cover controversy thing?" I showed them the picture and they went, "Oh." So Granov calls out Mattina for this. It kind of hits the traditional drama news circuit like a ton of bricks. Everyone's talking about it. A lot of great streams have talked about it before us. And again, this isn't the main focus of what we're going to be talking about, but this does kind of set the scene. So then fast forward in time a little bit, and you start to see that DC actually replaced the Mattina covers that were upcoming in solicitations with other artists. So, you saw the previews description change, either artists to be determined or replaced by other prominent artists, that usually do variant covers for DC. So that's one element of this. But the other element is that, there's a great Twitter thread that I showed Kyle, I think last week, where somebody kind of goes through and shows all the times that Mattina pretty clearly traced, copied, or used images. And the funny thing is, many of those images were from artists that did art for Sideshow Collectibles specifically, which makes it even bigger of a coincidence if that were to have happened. All this is alleged. All this is, it is technically possible that maybe somehow his art got out there first. That's not even the point of what we're going to be talking about today. But that is something that, has kind of been the history with this artist. And for years, despite that being something that people talked about very, very openly in closed conversations, still continued to get art. So that kind of makes us want to think about this topic of, we know there's other artists out there that do this. And again, we're not really here to talk about the ones we know do this or we've heard about in some ways, but we are here to talk about at what point does something that could be an homage become plagiarism? At what point do you cross the line? At what point do you need to credit the original artist? Those are some really interesting questions that I think kind of revolve around this topic that kind of become a secondary considerations other than just this one artist getting replaced for use of AI. And then everyone pointing out, hey, there's been tons of instances of basically copied art from this artist in the past.
Right. I can remember Mattina issues going back as far as 2017. Like in store going, well, I'm not going to order the Mattina cover no matter what the demand is because it's clearly stolen.
Yeah.
It's clearly plagiarism. But then having no issue with Rob Liefeld sketching over Rob Liefeld, which is something that, again, it's a little bit of a different demon, but other artists clearly basically tracing the work of artists who have gone before them and getting away with it because they put artist A after artist B, right? Artist Kyle after artist Bronze, right? As an homage, but I've clearly just sketched the cover because
Yeah.
there's no way I've hand drawn the replica that well. But now I'm coloring it differently. I'm making some adjustments to it to fit the work I'm doing, whatever. And we let that go as an homage, as a pastiche, as a whatever you want to call it. At what point does just crediting who you're stealing from stop being an homage and start becoming plagiarism?
Yeah, and I think, by the way, chat, we absolutely want to hear, we ask these questions sometimes. Sometimes they're for each other, and sometimes they're rhetorical, and we want you guys to chime in, and sometimes they're both. And it's a good question in terms of this, because for me, I am totally okay with homage covers in homaging, cover recreations when they are recreated. And like, I'll give you this example. I am a very amateur artist. I was out of art for a long time. And I'm learning how to draw.
Bronze is about 1 billion times better artist than I am. So when he says amateur, he's being humble. He's very good. I, on the other hand, am real bad.
Well, I don't.
But
I appreciate that.
I bring that up because I think we're going to, once you finish your point, I think I'm going to reference it again. So go ahead.
Okay. So even though, I think I have about 1 billion miles to go in my art journey, and that's the beauty of it, is it's actually never finished. But before I could get to a place where I'm happy with it, part of what I do is I constantly am referencing other artists, and in a few cases, because it's for me, for my practicing, even tracing some of that art to use as references, so I can be like, okay, I'm trying to recreate how figures are drawn. I'm trying to recreate proportions, and I keep drawing this anatomy. I keep drawing legs too long. That's one thing, for example. I keep drawing, spines aren't bending the right way. So if I can recreate the strokes of how one artist did it, it kind of helps me learn how to do that. Here's the difference. I'm not going to pass off that art as my own art. I'm going to use that as study and reference. And that's something that I think is extremely common in art school, at least, from what I know. And so I don't think it's something that is inherently bad. I think where it crosses into the bad territory is when you start to pass that off as your own creation. And even if it's an homage, there's lots of artists out there that do great recreations of other art. They do great homages, and it is completely drawn by themselves. At least as far as I can tell, really looking at it, a guy who does a really great job on it, Brett Booth, does a really great job he just did like an X-Men 100 recreation.
I was thinking Bob Layton.
Bob Layton, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
There's so you could throw a dart at how many great artists are out there doing things the right way. It's absolutely common. So by no means are we trying to say all artists are doing negative things here or bad stuff's happening, but it does become this question of like, where do you draw the line ethically and legally in terms of recreating this art? And for example, for me, if an artist like Brett Booth, then says after, John Byrne or after whoever drew the artwork that they're referencing, I am perfectly okay with that personally. That's just my personal take on it. If I see that something looks like it's traced, the funny thing is most of the time they don't write after in the image. They actually just pass it off as their own. That's one thing I've noticed. But even if they do, it's like, well, it does introduce this interesting gray area, because if you traced part of it, but then a ton of the artwork, like Kyle was saying, like the coloring or the inking, or even the character changes to a different character based on the costume or the stuff they've added to it. At what point do you kind of move away from the original creation? For me, it's impossible if that was your base, but I think some people have different interpretations of that. Would love to hear it.
Right. And that's kind of what I was getting at, is that I know artists who have straight up traced cover art and then gone back through in Procreate, straight up traced it onto a piece of paper, scanned it, and then gone into Procreate and changed angles, changed figures, done the work to make it unique enough that they can call it their own, but it starts from a somewhat dishonest place.
Yeah.
And again, usually they're copying to the homage, right? The artists I know that are doing it are 90% of the time saying, hey, this is an homage to this cover, but I've done it almost clown shoes style, where it's, why is his head so much bigger than his body? Well, that's this artist's style. Or, why do they have, 76 quadruple Z breasts when the original art was a dude? Well, because that's this artist's style. Like, it's, you start from someplace and then you homage it and you mash it up. Again, it's Weird Al doing Amish Paradise is a parody of Coolio's Gangsta's Paradise, is a sample of Stevie Wonder's Pastime Paradise. So is Weird Al parodying Stevie Wonder? Is he parodying Coolio? Or did Coolio rip off Stevie Wonder and then Weird Al parody Coolio? You get this sort of, it gets super gray and drawn out. And now you don't know where the call is coming from anymore. Is the call coming from inside the building? You don't, it's so hard to trace it back to the original origin that it just becomes its own thing.
Oh, hey, here's a fun one for the audience. This is a total tangent, but my ADHD is taking over for a second. He just made the reference to, is the call coming from inside the building? Shout out to anybody in chat who can tell me the movie where that trope originates. Even though that's not where the legend of it comes from, there is a movie where that's shown for the first time, and it's become a horror movie staple.
And it's not the one that I saw that I'm referencing.
Yeah. Extra meta.
Because I saw it in a not another teen movie kind of situation where they were referencing a reference of a reference.
Yeah, exactly. And then somebody remind me in a couple minutes if nobody's given the answer, and I'll somebody's probably going to Google it.
Also, favorite Weird Al songs in the chat. I'll come up with a prize and I'll give it to somebody whose favorite Weird Al song in the chat gets the most upvotes or something.
There we go. Nope. As far as I'm aware, I'm pretty sure I'm right about this one. At least in terms of a horror movie, I don't think that's the right answer, but man, watch me be wrong here, but this is a piece of trivia I learned from somebody else, and I'm hoping they did their research. So yeah, it's one of those things where I think that before you even get to the idea of AI, generative imagery being used, you really have this problem where this has just been an issue in traditional comic book artwork for a very, very, very long time. It's been an issue that kind of keeps cropping up over and over again. And When the Stranger Calls, nope. Wasn't it from I Know What You Did Last Summer or Scream? Nope. It's much older than those films. I'll give you that much.
Derek, those are the movies that I was referencing that not another teen movie was referencing.
Scream is the one that popularized it, I think, but it has a lineage that goes back further than that. The real problem for me is, there's artists out there. You mentioned Rob Liefeld tracing his own art. And I know another artist that has done that for themselves is Greg Land. I mean, there's several artists that do that. Hey, Jewish Dragons got it. As far as I know, that's the correct answer.
That is the correct answer according to the entirety of the internet.
There you go.
Because I Googled it to make sure that Bronze's answer was right, just so we could be correct. And it is, in fact, Black Christmas.
Yep. Great movie, by the way. Very, very disturbing, great movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I didn't remember it until I saw the cover of the movie poster. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, one of
the
prototypical horror movies.
The babysitter is not the direct quote, Nick, but it is also often referenced. The Babysitter and the Man Upstairs is also often referenced.
Well, I think that's the urban legend that spawned the whole trope in the first place. I think that movie was just referencing the urban legend, but yes, definitely. Yeah, watch the original. That's 100% true. K-pop.
Yeah. 1974.
Yep. It's I believe it's
Man.
on Prime if you're a streamer.
You know what we're going to have to do? We're going to have to get Rockin' Robbie from the earlier show, who does movie rewatches on his channel, and us all together around Christmas, and we're going to rewatch Black Christmas.
Oh, hell yeah.
And then we'll have group therapy on this show.
I love doing that. It's one of my favorite things. I'm always down for something like that. Yeah.
All right,
Hey,
but
have a
back
good night,
to
Nick.
the topic at hand. Thank you for being here, Nick. Way to play the game. Yeah, I think there's a distinct difference from stealing from yourself to stealing from other people. But at what point, when you're an artist like Rob Liefeld, who so many people try to emulate, like, we all know the man can't draw feet, but people still want to emulate him. You know, we all know that the man draws pockets funny, but people still want to emulate him. Whatever. At what point, when you've stolen from yourself several times, are you basically telling other people they can steal from you?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting element to this. It's because, like, ostensibly, I don't have an issue with an artist tracing their own work like that.
Right.
I mean, to be clear, I don't like it. It's going to make me think less of an artist in some ways, especially if they go to that well too many times. I think it's totally okay for them to do it, though, because they're the ones that did the work. And there's situations where, you know, like, I mentioned Greg Land earlier, he's kind of notorious in a lot of ways for tracing, but the element I really want to talk about, which is something I don't care about, is there's the Edge of Spider-Verse 2 cover, and he did a bunch of different Gwen variants that were from different multiverse realities. So Gwen is Wolverine, and Gwen as, you know, different characters, right? And he traced the image like pretty clearly from what I can tell, right? I don't care. Like, that's fine, because that's the joke, is that it's that same image over and over and over again with different versions. That's no different than like an artist who creates things entirely digitally, going back 6 layers in their art and wiping, you know, the colors and the costume and the inking or whatever, maybe not even the inking, and then recreating new layers on top of that. Would I call that plagiarism or tracing? Not really, because they're just kind of going back to their original template that they used for that art.
Well, and I will say this about Greg Land. Greg Land is notoriously good about putting who he traced or who he is homaging right on the cover. Land after, and I can't wait for him to trace an artist called Time, so it could say Land After Time on the cover. You know, but
That's awesome.
I've been saving that joke for about 10 years.
I like it.
Right. And then we can all talk about how it's supposed to be Land Before Time, bro. Anyway, but he is also notoriously good at, when he does that, crediting the original artist and referencing the homage. Which, in my opinion, goes a long way.
Yeah.
Doesn't go all the way, but it goes a long way.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get caught up with some chat here that wasn't about Black Christmas while you were talking.
Right. No, no, I saw your head dart, and I'm like, oh no, something is happening.
No. It's just, I have an ultra wide monitor, so for me to read chat, it's very obvious when I'm looking over at it.
Oh, you're good, but I just saw bang.
Yep.
Oh no. Okay. But no. So, what is, in your opinion, chat, and your opinion, Bronze, the difference between an homage and plagiarism?
So I'll give chat this intro to my answer to form their own opinions and start typing them out into chat. And then I'll say, for me, it plagiarism is passing off somebody else's work as your own, taking their creative efforts and calling it your own without credit. And I know that doesn't necessarily pin down exactly what plagiarism could be in terms of artwork, but it does it goes a long distance towards getting that definition settled for me. Because if you are tracing somebody's artwork and then never crediting them, that's plagiarism in my book. There are degrees of which that plagiarism can happen, but it's still at its core is plagiarism, just by my definition. When you start going deeper into recreating their art, as in like, yeah, and that can be painstakingly done, by the way. Like people can sit there and really hone in on somebody's art and redo it. I'm okay with that. I don't consider that plagiarism, even technically, if they don't, after so and so, if that's not included, like after Kyle, like we were using in the example earlier. I don't think it's technically required. I think it's nice when they do it. I'd prefer that they do that, but at the same time, I think we've all seen a million AF-15 homages. We've all seen a million ASM 300 homages. Do we really need to say, after McFarlane or after Ditko or something like that after it? I don't think we necessarily need to, but it's nice. It's really preferred. Part of the problem too is it's not just covers. It does happen in interior art. And when it happens in interior art, I feel like artists take a freer reign with it in not crediting it. That said, I really, really, really appreciate when there are artists that do homage something in their interiors and still put after original artist. And when I see that, it just makes my heart melt. Honestly, like that is seriously a class move. So, well, I don't know. That's kind of where I draw the line.
Yeah. We've got some in the style of versus direct copy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is maybe the most simple way to put it, Derek. Well put. Often people will buy the original art in order to own a piece of the artist. And again, figure drawing, we're not necessarily specifically talking about AI. We're talking about the entire business of plagiarism, the entire business of art.
Yeah, and like to peel back the curtain in a very important way, just to explain the thumbnail of the show for people that are tuning in or watching this on the rewind, we appreciate you. The tip of the iceberg refers to, in this case, literally that the way I interpreted it is Mattina doing this AI generative imagery cover for Superman with the double S on the bottom. That is the tip of the iceberg to this issue, because the fact that it was using AI generation is not really the important part to me. The important part is that you go back to look at the history of this artist, and I think to most people there's a very clear track record of basically this kind of plagiarism and theft of art. And that is what's crazy, is that why is this artist still receiving so much work from companies like DC, for example? And that to me is the meat of the issue. And really even more so, not this one artist, but the fact that it happens in art, it's accepted. And I think the answer, by the way, is they're quick, they're fast, because they are taking shortcuts in their art. So they're meeting deadlines. And a lot of companies are not catching when this happens, or they're not aware of it, or they don't care.
Right. So Juice Dragon says, as a reader, in my opinion, it comes down to, does it break the storytelling? Does the homage have a purpose, or is there something the artist didn't hide well, and now I notice it? And I think we want to delve in a little bit more to what Bronze just said and sort of that kind of concept after the break. But before we go to the break, I guess the question I want to leave us with before we go to the break is, Mattina got caught. And I say that given the stipulation that using the methods we currently have available with which to catch someone doing this. With other things, I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me.
I'm gonna sneeze too. Achoo! After Kyle, get it? Sorry, had to.
If that hadn't hurt so bad, I'd have laughed. That was a painful sneeze. Anyhow, Mattina got caught using the methods we have. When I was in school, when you wrote a paper, your teacher would feed the paper into a program that would tell you, oh, this is plagiarized, or oh, this is it's plagiarized because it's not cited properly. Things like that. We have that for AI, but we don't have that for sketching, for cover bashing, for some of this other stuff. So the question I'll leave you with is, do you think it is a bigger, more prominent issue than just a couple of artists who have become well known? Or is it less of an issue and it's just a few bad actors sort of ruining the ball for everybody? So when we come back, we'll discuss that topic, and who knows where else we'll go. Maybe we'll talk about pie. We'll be back right after this on Devil's Advocates.
By this time in our journey, we had been on the trail of a very elusive creature for about 96 hours. But all the hard work is about to pay off. Oh, crikey, there she is. Oh, by the markings, I'd say this one's at least a 9.8. Oh, she's a real beauty. A true mint copy. Oh, this one would make a fine slab on anyone's display wall. Oh, she's a feisty one, though. Look out, look out!
Mint Hunter Comics is the place to find that mint comic you've been searching for. Mint Hunter Comics, Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, part of the experience.
Download our app on Google Play and the App Store. It's so simple, even my mommy can use it. In a world where you hit like and subscribe on our YouTube channel, that'd be really great. Thanks. What's up, the internet? Welcome back into Devil's Advocates. I am producer Kyle. That guy is the Bronze Age nerd. And before we dive back into this topic, we wanted to let you know that after talking to each other and talking to people we trust and people we value their opinions on, this week and next will be the last episodes of Devil's Advocates. Something else will be taking its place, probably starring that guy, and I'll probably come around every once in a while. But we are, it's clear that what we're doing here isn't working the way we wanted it to and feel like it's kind of run its course. And it's time to move on to something that will be more interesting for everyone and less stressful for me. I say that because I don't know how stressful it is for Bronze. But, right.
No, but I think it's important to point out that when we originally envisioned this show, we didn't necessarily see it going this long in its current format. Right. And I think we've had a lot of great success with a lot of the topics we've talked about. There are tons of streams that you can go back and find in our catalog that I'm really proud of that we did. And I think that some of it is a little bit of the Seinfeld theory of things, which is you don't want to quit when you've, kind of milked the cow dry and all the ideas are used up. And that's why we had a couple ideas we wanted to go with, even though we had this kind of brewing for a little while, which is this week's topic and next week's topic as well. But it is one of those things where I think it's kind of come to a natural ending point. We've gotten, feedback. We've been in conversation, and we don't want to be, trying to squeeze water from a stone to try to make the show good for months to come. So yeah, we have next week's show, and then the week after that, I'm going on vacation. We've kicked around some ideas for a replacement show. So it's still in the design phases. There's some ideas I've had, some ideas Kyle and Jay brought forward. One thing is, even though we've used the website that we've recommended in the past to go give us topic ideas, at this point, I would just love to offer up, if you guys want to go to that website, which I'm sure our excellent producer Jay will be throwing into the chat any second because he's just that good. Now I'm putting a lot of pressure on him. Right. If you want to go there and suggest any show ideas or show themes that you'd like to see from myself, or and to some extent from the EXP, but mostly with me involved, I would actually really appreciate that, because I want to talk about the kind of things you guys are interested in and you want to see more of. And like I said, I have some ideas, but maybe one of you will help spark me into making that idea a little bit more concrete and moving forward in a positive way.
Well, and I'm glad somebody clicked on that. I just wanted to mention, Derek, we certainly haven't, but we've gotten to the point where there are other shows that need my attention as the executive producer of the experience. There's content we've been trying to get on the air for the better part of a year now, that just because of the way my week breaks down, I don't have a ton of time to shepherd it across the finish line. So by making this change, we're going to have Bronze and myself and Jay and Bigby and whoever else gets involved come into the show and make it into something that will be more interesting for everyone, and at the same time free me up to go out and make some new shows that we think y'all are really going to like and appreciate. So
yeah,
that is the big announcement for today. We are not AI. We are not cover swipes. We are just ending the show in a couple of weeks. So yeah, that's the direction we're going there. So
sweet. Yeah, no, and absolutely. I appreciate everybody's support on the show for as long as we've been doing it. It's really meant a lot to me. So I absolutely appreciate everybody who's had, positive words, constructive criticism, all those things. I think we're going to end up in a better place for what's going to fill this time slot and for the EXP in general.
That would be an interesting debate there, Derek. I don't know when Bronze started growing his beard, but I know when I started growing mine.
Yeah. Yeah, I got canceled. That's what happened. We're going to...
Yeah, CJ. Although CJ and I may have to reach out to CJ. CJ and I may need to make a once a month show called "The Hands and the Beard Yell at the Sun" or something to that effect.
You want to talk about show that would just get gangbuster ratings? There you go. There you go. You two going at it on a topic would be awesome. I'd love to see it. But yeah, it's one of those things. We'll move forward. Again, I would appreciate any of those suggestions that anybody wants to put out there. And I do appreciate what we've done here. And I think there's been some really great conversations. At some point, we keep even this topic, we're referencing at least 2 other streams pretty heavily that we've done in the past. And our opinions probably haven't changed enough to really warrant us. Like, if we needed to talk about this one more time, at some point, we're kind of just rehashing old topics, much like artists who rehash the artwork from other artists. So
thank you for that segue there, Bronze.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. What can I say?
Yeah. So before we went to the break, you can have all the Kit Kats, CJ, because I can't eat them anymore because the blood sugar gets out of control when I do, and I'm super addicted to Kit Kats. So it's a real bad scene.
I keep doing this, and I'm sorry to break the flow, but I got to know, in chat, tell me your favorite seasonal, promotional, different Kit Kat flavor besides the original. I'm curious what everybody says.
King size regular.
King size regular. Well, I mean, that's what, yeah. There's nothing wrong with that, but I am curious.
My former business partner lives in Japan and routinely sends me the crazy flavors they get. And I've, in my life, liked like 2 of them, and they're both just variations on original.
Okay, yeah, the matcha ones are. I thought that's where you're going. I really like those. But
yeah, I like the mint chocolate, and they did like a chocolate malt that basically tasted like a Kit Kat meets a Whopper. That was pretty good.
They just did one that was a Boston cream donut or something like that, and I actually am surprised how much it tasted like a donut. Like that was bizarre to me.
When I joked that we were going to talk about pie, I did not see it going this direction.
Oh, I mean, this is just a callback to our very first episode where we did talk about Cheesecake Factory and pie and everything, right? Like food comes
It's
up every
true.
episode.
It's true.
Uh,
Whatever we replace this show with, we'll have to have a food-based segment.
it's certainly a contender.
When we left before the break, I had asked kind of a big question.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to be honest with you. The Kit Kat talk has made me forget what the question was.
Well, honestly, like I was thinking about what we were going to talk about this. So there was the discussion about when an homage becomes an homage, no longer becomes an homage, and crosses over into plagiarism.
Oh, I remember what it was now. And I appreciate you reminding me just then. Is this a bigger issue or is this an isolated issue? I.e., is the business of plagiarism, the business of art theft, the business of cover bashing, the business of tracing more prevalent than we know and we're already sunk because it's just so ingrained? Or is Mattina getting caught going to out a few bad actors and we're going to be able to go back to only having to sort of deal with the one pressing issue, which is generative AI?
Yeah, and thank you for rephrasing the question. It is it's both, in my opinion, in a weird way, because I really think we're at this point where an artist getting outed as doing this is important because it sends a message. There are consequences to this. You know, if every artist that did this had free reign to do it forever, it would become more and more prevalent because it's shortcuts are often rewarded when they have financial gains, right? And they're usually a bad thing. When it comes to this, it's definitely going to help shine a light on this. That's what we're talking about, CJ. We're talking about him having been accused of crap like this for years. That's literally the point of this
Right.
topic.
Like, and again, it's not so much the Mattina story as it is Mattina the tip of the iceberg?
Yeah. And really, I think the other element is, you know, primarily we're talking about swipes, plagiarism, tracing, all those things. And that's true. One thing I wanted to talk about, though, is there is this AI detection thing. And again, this isn't primarily about AI, but with AI generation becoming obviously more prevalent and better all the time, it is going to impact this topic quite a bit. And there's one element that I want to kind of clear up here because it gets brought up a lot when we talk about detection and we talk about different methods to try to detect this. And hey, you know, luckily we have methods right now to detect this kind of stuff. There are two elements to that are really important to remember. Are, for now, we have technology that can catch us, and also not always, because a lot of that technology can be fooled pretty easily. Actually, there's I won't disclose his name because I'm not sure he wants me to, but there's an artist who he doesn't do comic books really. He does kind of almost like custom made creations, but he fully discloses that he uses AI to do it. And I'll tell Kyle, because I can see the inquisitive look on his face right now. I'll tell him after the show. He does these really cool projects. I think they're neat because he is out there saying, I'm just using AI to do this. But the concepts he's coming up with in the first place are really the creative element of the work.
Right.
And again, he's disclosing that he used them. But I've had these conversations with him, and he's pointed out that he can fool AI detection software reliably. Right. Whether that's real art that was actually hand-drawn, turned into coming up as a false positive for AI, or the other way around, taking AI-generated imagery and having it come back as human-made.
And I want to put this out there as we kind of discuss this, because we have kind of taken a very straight line on this AI thing, and I know CJ has, and I know many others have. There are artists out there who are building AI systems trained specifically on their own art, not trained off of the entirety of the internet, not trained off of other people, trained off exclusively of their own art to help them with things as they evolve the art they're creating.
Yeah.
One of them is on the forefront of augmented reality comics. Now, this person has built their own and trained their own in-house closed loop AI system off of literally their own work to help them solve problems like light source movement in augmented reality comics. You know, to help them solve where the shadows fall in a 3D modeled version of this character. There is ethical use of AI happening.
Yeah.
For every one of those, there are 100 unethicals. So I want to make a point to say that's kind of why we're not specifically talking about AI. We're talking about the business of the shortcut,
Yeah.
right? And I will say this: I spoke to someone earlier who has work that has been submitted to them to be published by Mattina, and they've run it through the scans to tell if it's AI or not, and it's passed. Whether that's Mattina fooling a scan or whether that's Mattina actually having created this thing, I can't answer that. But based on the rubric we have now, he's passed.
Yeah.
For this particular person. So here is my question. What do you do when you have a person who has been caught, essentially, based on our current methodologies, but who's also passing on other pieces of work? Are they stealing for some work and not stealing for others? Do you think that's a thing? Or do you think it's, I was overworked, so I took a shortcut and I got busted doing it?
Yeah.
I don't know, especially because the artist whose name is in the title has been cutting corners for years.
Yep. I am aware of a couple artists that, and I'm not interested in naming who they are, but I'm aware of a couple artists that I know have used AI, generative AI, in their work at times, and yet are completely capable of drawing perfectly fine on their own. And in those cases, I think that a lot of times it comes down to deadlines, shortcuts, thinking if I have increased productivity, I can put out more covers and make more money. And you know, I'll be honest, another person, I mentioned this before on the air, another thing that's interesting to talk about in this is partial uses or avant-garde uses of things like AI, for example. I just kind of came to me, I should probably mention this. So I had a conversation with Jim Starlin at Washington SummerCon, and he was talking about, you know, very openly how he's taken to using some AI generation for some of the backgrounds of some of his art, and using that as more of like a starting point, and then going back and painting over that. But again, you know, we're talking about different ways that this is kind of evolving and changing over time. It's happening in two different tracks. It's happening with AI and it's happening with traditional art or digital art in kind of more of a hand-drawn sense, where it's either tracing and copying or used through AI. And at a certain point, we need to really be asking companies, asking publishers to do what we want them to do. If a lot of us don't want this kind of art being produced, like the stuff that is a trace or a generative AI image or something like that, then we need to put the pressure on them to try to moderate the use of that. Companies that are trying and doing everything they can to catch this stuff, they're not always going to catch it. And I think that's, as long as they're trying, as long as they're keeping an eye out. Some of the stuff I've seen posted, like on that thread where I was talking about Mattina, there's a thread of imagery being compared. unless you saw both images, you may not know that it was ever done that way. And that's a hard thing to track down.
Right.
But
And
if they're trying.
Right. No, it's true. And here's something else that we kind of haven't talked about. How do we know how the original piece was created?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not throwing shade at Sideshow, but their focus is the toy and not the box art. So if you start off from a place of dishonesty, maybe not with necessarily generative AI, but with some other form of bashing images together to create things, or, photo manipulation or whatever to create the original piece. And then somebody else is now stealing that original piece and tracing it. How many wrongs make a right? How many times does this have to happen before you actually are getting an original, unique piece?
Yeah, it's really like a how deep do you want to go down the rabbit hole kind of a look at it, because at what point are publishers or people who are commissioning artists supposed to require video evidence that the imagery was created, whether that's a montage, whether that's like one of those time-lapse footage of the being created? I mean, that's a relatively new thing. There's no way that some artist sitting at Artist Alley working on a commission for the weekend is going to think to video every single one of those. And if they are, it ends up being a very large file they have to store. But that's at one point, that's about as close as you can get to saying, here's the evidence that this was made, the original piece was made by the artist. And the reason why I'm saying that is, at some point here, not too far from now, it is extremely conceivable that you could have an AI generated image created and then tell a different program, hey, let's go ahead and create AI video of me creating that art. That what we're maybe like 2 years away from that. It's just one of those things where I think at some point you really have to wonder, like, at what point are we going to have to step in and really draw a line here? And then that's whether that's AI, whether that's tracing, whether that's traditional plagiarism. It's absolutely a very deep issue, very broad issue too.
Right. And the problem I have, and it's kind of, there's two things I want to kind of mention here, and it's what CJ's talking about. Land and Horn have been accused of light boxing and tracing for years. Like we talked about earlier, Greg Land is really good at acknowledging who he's tracing, right? Who he's homaging through that tracing. Greg Horn has been as well. Maybe not necessarily as good as Greg Land, but pretty good. Folks like Mattina haven't always been.
Yeah.
And that's where the issue comes in. And then Jewish Dragons ask, if the issue is increasing, do you think it's a result to whatever extent of the market needing so many covers? Is it harder to innovate so many art? Is it now harder to innovate so many artists turn to swipes, AI, etc.? And, that was a conversation I was having with myself earlier when I was looking at this week's releases and seeing how many covers there are for some of these products. And I would imagine if you have an artist who is used to a certain quality output in traditional mechanisms, getting more and more and more work, and these deadlines coming closer and closer and closer together, it's harder not to lean into the tools available. To do that, right? I mean, I can remember working in radio, and we had a spot that needed to be created on like a 25-minute deadline. And so rather than going through and actually writing and producing a new spot, we just edited clips out of old commercials for the same client and made a new one. It's not what we were supposed to do, but it got the job done until we were able to have time to create something new.
Yeah, and I want to bounce off of that a little bit too, because to me, that's like the ultimate, dog chasing its own tail kind of thing here, because I think there's a lot of truth to what you just said, Jewish Dragons. I think that there is probably, like I mentioned, deadlines a couple times, and I know that some artists struggle to come in under deadline, and they kind of come up with shortcuts to get there. And then the irony to me is then if this is part of the problem, where it is that there's so many covers out there that publishers are then saying, hey, we need 17 artists to make covers for this one issue. It's hilarious, because part of why I've always supported that model is because it's giving artists work, because they're getting the opportunity to produce covers and getting paid to get a cover out there. And I like artists being paid for their work and more artists getting money. That's the part of like the too many variant covers thing we've talked about in the past, where I really get behind is, okay, that's good for artists, and then they can sell the original if they're drawing traditionally, and great, they're making money. But if the sole problem is if we end up with this kind of Ouroboros of, we're asking artists to create a lot of covers, now there's so many cover requests out there that they can't keep up with them, that they're having to come up with shortcuts, that is just that's like a comic book episode of Black Mirror to me. Like, it is just a darkest timeline kind of a thing. I hope that's not the case, but I think there might be some truth to that.
I hear what Braun said earlier. I hear what Figure Drawing is saying. I hear what a lot of folks are saying about AI art. And I want you to understand two things that maybe aren't super apparent. One, AI art is almost already impossible to detect. There are mechanisms that will do it, but they're not foolproof.
Yep.
But two, what happens with the proliferation of this technology is that eventually it cannibalizes itself. AI art doesn't contain all of the data AI art looks for to train. So you get black holes, essentially. And so what happens is AI art starts scraping a site for art content, and it's scraping other AI art produced by other AI mechanisms. Yeah. And it gets these really weird black holes is what they're being called in the field right now, where there's no data that it can read to fill in. So eventually it will cannibalize itself to being almost irrelevant. And that's part of what we have to deal with, right? As AI gets better, the flaws will also get bigger. It's the iRobot mentality, right? Eventually this thing that's good will become bad, not because it's destined to become bad, but because data is data. There's only so much of it, and when you run out of it, you can't fill in the gaps with not data.
Yeah, so, and also just to address like the point CJ just made, the other thing I want to educate people on, some people will be educated, some people won't, and that's fine. There, like we mentioned earlier and gave a couple examples, AI art, which is a term that I stopped using, but just for the sake of this conversation, there's so many disciplines of that, so many uses of that are not, just to use that as one umbrella is almost, it's quickly becoming outdated.
Yeah, it's a misrepresentation of what's actually happening, right?
Exactly. Like Kyle mentioned, the artist training off their own artwork. If you go around just calling that, generative AI art, is it technically true? Yes. Is it true in the way that when you say that to most people, they're going to assume what's the actual reality of the situation is, where it's just one artist using their own artwork and they're using it for a very specific purpose to convert that to AR, which is augmented reality? No, that's not going to come across. So you have to be more specific. Like what Starlin talked about doing, where he's taking AI generated, I think, photography of nightscapes, essentially, because he does a lot of the cosmic stuff. And then he's using that as a jumping off point to create his own artwork on top of it. That's a much different situation than someone saying, K-pop's talking about art germ. That's the very classic example of AI generative imagery, being stolen from artists. Is show me a sexy version of Psylocke in the style of art germ into an AI prompter and coming out with an image. That's a very different thing, and that's a very specific thing. One that I cannot support. I don't support that in any way. I think there are ways, though, that we will see AI used in the field of comic books that we are going to eventually adapt to. That isn't to say we're going to give an inch and give a mile. Like, that's not what I want to see happen. But I just think that there are ways that it's going to be used. Much like, the example of Photoshop. Everyone loves to say, like, oh, digital art will never happen in comics. Well, look where we're at now. And some people say that's terrible, and some people say it's great. But I think there are use cases for it. And I think that's all to make a point that this is all distinctly different from the idea of just taking the concept of taking somebody else's art and drawing it, panel for panel as if it's been traced or used in that way without any kind of acknowledgement. And that is much different.
So just as a point, those of you who are referencing the Adobe situation, don't count your chickens, is all I'm going to say about that. There is a pretty common misunderstanding between AI and what Adobe intends to do with the rights that they've asked for. And at the same time, there are very easy and simple ways to work around it. So it turns into everybody's jumping up and down when they don't really know why they're jumping quite yet. So just know that there is a lawsuit. It will become public. It will be settled in a very public way, and it will make everything super clear to everyone.
It's interesting, by the way, because maybe I'm a little behind on things. I thought Adobe had made a clarification about that AI terms of service update too. But I mean, maybe I'm out of date on the topic too.
They did make an update. That update was pretty thin.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, the thing Adobe wants with that right is machine learning rather than generative AI. And the workaround is don't save stuff to Adobe's cloud. Save stuff to your own machine. And they can't access it. Like, it's not so blurry as it seemed originally.
Gotcha.
So just know that. But at the same time, learn to use other tools other than AI, because the real predatory AI or the real predatory Adobe practice, learn to use other tools rather than just Adobe. The real predatory Adobe practice is their current subscription model.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's bad enough.
They can't K-pop because that is a violation of federal law. So back to the topic, because this really did veer off into AI more than we wanted it to. Because again, I think the AI part of this exists over here.
Yeah.
In the world,
it's
right?
Just
it's
one
part
element of it.
And it leaks into the bigger conversation we're having. But there have been numerous cases where it's other things fed through whatever filter, fed through whatever other thing that we're referencing here. It's cover tracing, it's art bashing, it's swipes. And that's where, when you start running that stuff through some of this other generative work, you start to have problems.
Yeah.
So I guess we're over our time already. And I want to kind of come back to the question that we sort of asked in the title and we sort of asked before the first break. Do you, Bronze, think this is a bigger problem than we know and the industry has already sunk into it? Or is this the very beginning of finding out how deep the rabbit hole goes? And if we work hard enough right now, we can go the other direction.
Yeah, I think that elements of this are entrenched into comic books at almost a business level, to the point where we're never going to get rid of it. However, I think that cases like the Mattina issue coming up and others will send a message and draw some lines, which can create a framework for comic books to move forward in a way that is not necessarily going to sink deeper into this practice when it comes to the general use of it. And, I think things like, when it comes to, like, for example, I'm going to mention DC because they're the company that pulled so many covers from Mattina after this happened. And they've had some issues in the very recent past too, with some cover controversies. If they're thinking twice about this, hopefully that also means that they're looking into other covers being submitted and they're checking it out. They're kind of maybe doing a little bit more research and due diligence. I really hope that that's the case, because it's stuff like that. If an artist turns in a commission for a cover and they get a message back from editorial saying, yeah, we can't use this cover, this clearly is derivative artwork of somebody else, or this, it's not credited, this is clear, if they start getting that message, yeah, they're going to stop doing it or start doing it in more creative ways down the road to try to avoid getting caught, I suppose. But it's gonna change up the current dynamic a little bit if that starts to happen, and that's the kind of pressure we do need to apply. Honestly, streams like this too help, because it's showing artists that may tune into this. Who knows? Maybe the next future Jim Lee or J. Scott Campbell or Art Germ is watching this stream and they're realizing, man, people really don't like when people go out there and steal other artists' work. Just hearing that message is important. And getting that out there is important because it can help create the culture where we don't want that. We don't allow that if we know it exists. So it's going to help kind of us as a community police that from happening in the future. That's kind of where I think this is going. I do think it is a problem that exists. I don't see it completely vanishing anytime soon, even if it's just hiding in plain sight as an homage or an so-and-so after Jack Kirby or whatever. I think it's still going to happen, but at least it'll happen in a way that's a more above board and more accepted in comics.
Right. I think we have a number of problems we have to face before we can actually answer this question. I think we're not Baby Jessica at the bottom of the well, but we're also not looking at the top. We're somewhere down the chute, right?
Yeah.
The number of things we need to address is ethical AI, which is a thing that can exist. As much as some of you in the chat don't think it can. Ethical AI is a thing that can exist and can be useful. So we need to solve what that is. But then the publishers of content have to make a decision right now. Is it worth it to them to make more money by being able to pay people less? By the way, a big name artist is not going to get paid less just because they used AI. They're still going to get their page rate, and they're going to, cheat, for lack of a better term. But is it better for a publisher to use that or to not use that?
Yeah.
And once publishers realize that the biggest portion of the community is against it, it's going to have to be something that's written into contracts. And it's going to have to be something that is written in retroactively. They're going to have to go back to the Art Germs, to the Mattinas, to the Lands, to the whoever's, and say, hey, We understand that we are the reason you're in such high demand. We understand that we are the reason that these tools. See, I knew CJ wouldn't understand, but we understand that we are the reason that these tools are so appetizing to you. However, we're not going to pay you if we find out you use them. We're not going to, you're going to owe us money. We are going to whatever. And these need to be spelled out very clearly and very specifically. And I think because this is such a new field, it's not happening yet in most places.
Yeah.
And the third thing I think we need to sort out is a more foolproof way to detect this art. Right? To detect, okay, this is a trace. This is a cover bash. This is AI. This is Photoshop. This is whatever. And based on the criteria of the contract that the artist has signed, is the answer to whether or not it's legit, whether or not it's legal, whether or not it can be used. And until you disincentivize people, the incentive to use it and make a higher profit is going to be way too high. And so I think that's where we're at, right? We're kind of falling down the rabbit hole. We're not to the bottom yet, and we could still climb out, but it's going to take a lot of effort.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, things like this getting called out and talked about are important footholds in that, not slipping down too far.
Yep. So,
and hey, straight to the point, a couple people that are disagreeing with themselves or with us in chat, that's fine. Those conversations still need to happen. Like, that's
right.
Perfectly fine. And thankfully they're happening in a mostly respectful way. So that's good.
Right. So, that said, next week, Bronze and I are going to talk about the latest time Kyle has broken the internet. And by broken the internet, I mean gotten a whole bunch of comic people all kinds of upset with him. And we are going to discuss what is an indie publisher and what isn't. So, next week, be here, 10:30 Eastern, for the last Devil's Advocates. And then take a week off while Bronze goes on vacation. And when you come back, there'll be something new here. Maybe I'll be here. Maybe I won't. We don't know yet because we don't know what it is. Maybe we'll have the AI. Maybe we'll have the AI spit out some ideas.
Oh no! Don't say that.
I have an idea for a show. You guys should just shave your beards.
Oh man, it would be 99% beard related.
Right. That's the kind of crap it would spit out for us. So, we won't be doing that, but we will be back in we'll be back next week. And then 2 weeks from then, the new show debuts. Yay!
Yeah.
So, everybody tune in tomorrow. Jay is reading for review with Miss Jen, while I am frantically trying to get this editing project that I've been working on for 6 months done. Trying to get that done while Jay does that. And then we'll have Mint Hunter Comics, who's doing a cool show. And Honest Henri from Chicago is back from ALA. So he will be on tomorrow night at 10 o'clock. And then Wednesday, you have Comic Collectibles with Rex. And then all of our normal shows on Wednesday. Thursday night, we're all taking a night off to go try and not blow our fingers off with pyrotechnics. I would encourage you all, if you are going to blow stuff up, be super safe.
Light responsibly.
Light responsibly. CJ, that means don't do it with the cigarette you're halfway through. I've tried that. It doesn't work. In fact, I had a firework blow up right here, right behind my head, and burned the back of my head when I was young because I lit it with a cigarette. And I say that just because I've been watching CJ streams this week. So while I've been working. So CJ's videos. So
Yeah, check those out. They're good.
yeah, great channel. Everybody else, we love you for being here. Thank you for being here. We will see you next week. And until then, be safe. Buy more comics. Did you know that Arthur, King of the Britons, in Monty Python and the Holy Grail was played by a famous Graham? Check out another famous Graham by following our Instagram.